Hey guys, thanks for joining me for the second half of chapter 20. I will point out that we are going to continue on our chart as we go. So if you come across an idea as we're reading, write it down on your chart. I'm not going to interrupt the reading at this point to stop and go back to it, but you can certainly write it on your chart, and then we can come back whole class and share some of these ideas that we came up with. So this is not a chart that is going away just because I stopped and did it in class. We're going to continue to add to these ideas, whether or not Jonas should or should not leave the community. We're going to finish up chapter 20, and then please do not go on to chapter 21 yet. I have another activity that we will do together in class, which will take a full class period. So if I've assigned this as homework, this needs to be done tonight, or you're not going to understand the assignment tomorrow. All right, so let's take a look at the rest of chapter 20. It was late at night now. We're on page 155 in the Black Book. They had talked and talked. Jonas sat wrapped in a robe belonging to the giver, the long robe that only elders wore. It was possible, what they had planned. Barely possible. If it failed, he would very likely be killed. Oh, I want to go back. It should not leave the community because he might be killed. But what did that matter? If he stayed, his life was no longer worth living. Life is not worth living. Should we pause? Let's put these down. I just can't resist. Okay. He could be killed. Life not worth living. Why? Inference, making it. What's the reason? Oh my goodness, you can't see it. Why is life not worth living? Because he has no one to share feelings with, nobody to share the memories with, right? Add one of those there, okay? So we've got our second bullet. He could be killed. Life not worth living. I should have done that in the beginning. All right, we're going to go back to the chapter. Yes, he told the giver, I'll do it. I think I can do it. I'll try anyway, but I want you to come with me. The giver shook his head. Jonas, he said, the community has depended all these generations back and back and back on a resident receiver to hold their memories for them. I've turned over many of them to you in the past year, and I can't take them back. There's no way for me to get them back if I have given them. So if you escape, once you are gone, and Jonas, you know that you can never return. Which side? Never return? Yeah. Jonas nodded solemnly. It was the terrifying part. Yes, he said, I know, but if you come with me, the giver shook his head and made a gesture to silence him. He continued, if you get away, if you get beyond, if you get to elsewhere, it will mean that the community has to bear the burden themselves of the memories you have been holding for them. I think that they can, and that they will acquire some wisdom, but it will be desperately hard for them. When we lost Rosemary 10 years ago, and her memories returned to the people, they panicked. And those were such few memories compared to yours. Remember how I helped you in the beginning when the receiving of memories was new to you? Jonas nodded. It was scary at first, and it hurt a lot. You needed me then, and now they will. It's no use. They'll find someone to take my place. They'll choose a new receiver. There's no one ready for training, not right away. Oh, they'll speed up the selection, of course, but I can't think of another child who has the right qualities. There's a little female with pale eyes, but she's only a 6. That's correct. I know the one you mean. Her name is Catherine. but she's too young, so they'll be forced to bear those memories. I want you to come, Giver, Jonas pleaded. No, I have to stay here, the Giver said firmly. I want to, Jonas. If I go with you and together we take away all their protection from the memories, Jonas, the community will be left with no one to help them. They'll be thrown into chaos. They'll destroy themselves. I can't go. That's that word that I mentioned. So I'm going to stop the share because I am going to put that in there. I mentioned that they can't handle the memories, but what happens when they get them? They don't know what to do with it, but that becomes chaos. What does that word chaos mean? Chaotic. They can't handle it. Everything's crazy, right? I don't know how the world feels sometimes today, but he's going to help them get an understanding of what the memories are and be able to synthesize and connect them together so that they are not in complete chaos. That's the goal anyways, right? We don't know if they haven't done it yet. This is just the plan. Giver, Jonas suggested, you and I don't need to care about the rest of them. The Giver looked at him with a questioning smile. Jonas hung his head. Of course they needed to care. It was the meaning of everything. Think about that for just a minute. He wants the Giver to come with him because he doesn't want to be alone. This is a scary thing he's thinking about doing, right? And he's like, we don't need to care about those people. Just you and I, let's get out of here. This place is horrible. But then they realize, so why is the Giver staying back? He's going to help them. They want things to actually change, right? They want these people to have a better life where they can feel and care and love each other. So obviously the whole reason for him leaving is to make things better eventually for these people. And in any case, Jonas, the Giver sighed, I wouldn't make it. I'm very weakened now. Do you know that I no longer see colors? Jonas's heart broke. He reached for the Giver's hand. You have the colors, the Giver told him, and you have the courage. I will help you to have the strength. A year ago, Jonas reminded him, when I had just become a 12, when I began to see the first color, you told me that the beginning had been different for you, but that I wouldn't understand. The Giver brightened. That's true. And do you know, Jonas, that with all your knowledge now, with all your memories, with all you've learned, still you won't understand because I've been a little selfish. I haven't given any of it to you. I wanted to keep it for myself to the last. Keep what? When I was just a boy, younger than you, it began to come to me, but it wasn't the seeing beyond for me. It was different. For me, it was hearing beyond. Jonas frowned, trying to figure that out. What did you hear? He asked. Music, the Giver said, smiling. I began to hear something truly remarkable, and it is called music. I'll give you some before I go. Jonas shook his head emphatically. No, Giver, he said, I want you to keep that, to have with you when I'm gone. Jonas went home the next morning, cheerfully greeted his parents, and lied easily about what a busy and pleasant night he had had. His father smiled and lied easily, too, about his busy and pleasant day the day before. Throughout the school day, as he did his lessons, Jonas went over the simple plan in his head. It seemed startlingly simple. Jonas and the Giver had gone over it and over it late into the night hours. For the next 2 weeks, as the time for the December ceremony approached, the Giver would transfer every memory of courage and strength that he could to Jonas. He would need those to help him find the elsewhere that they were both sure existed. They knew it would be a very difficult journey. Then, in the middle of the night before the ceremony, Jonas would secretly leave his dwelling. This was probably the most dangerous part because it was a violation of a major rule for any citizen not on official business to leave a dwelling at night. I'll leave at midnight, Jonas said. The food collectors will be finished picking up the evening meal remains by then, and the path maintenance crews don't start their work that early. So there won't be anyone to see me, unless, of course, someone is out on emergency business. I don't know what you should do if you are seen, Jonas, the giver had said. I have memories, of course, of all kinds of escapes, people fleeing from terrible things throughout history, but every situation is individual. There is no memory of one like this. I'll be careful, Jonas said. No one will see me. As receiver in training, you're held in very high respect already, so I think you wouldn't be questioned very forcefully. I'd just say I was on some important errand from the receiver. I'd say it was all your fault that I was out after hours, Jonas teased. They both laughed, a little nervously, but Jonas was certain that he could slip away unseen from his house, carrying an extra set of clothing. Silently, he would take his bicycle to the riverbank and leave it there, hidden in bushes, with the clothing folded beside it. Then he would make his way through the darkness on foot, silently to the annex. There's no nighttime attendant, the giver explained. I'll leave the door unlocked. You simply slip into the room. I'll be waiting for you. His parents would discover when they woke that he was gone. They would also find a cheerful note from Jonas on his bed, telling them that he was going for an early morning ride along the river, that he would be back for the ceremony. His parents would be irritated, but not alarmed. They would think him inconsiderate and would plan to chastise him later. They would wait with mounting anger for him. Finally, they would be forced to go, taking Lily to the ceremony without him. They won't say anything to anyone, though, Jonas said, quite certain. They won't call attention to my rudeness because it would reflect on their parenting. And anyway, everyone is so involved in the ceremony that they probably won't notice that I'm not there. Now that I'm a 12 and in training, I don't have to sit with my age group anymore, so Asher will think I'm with my parents or with you. And your parents will assume you're with Asher or with me. Jonas shrugged. It will take everyone a while to realize that I'm not there at all. And you and I will be long on our way by then. In the early morning, the giver would order a vehicle and a driver from the speaker. He visited the other communities frequently, meeting with their elders. His responsibilities extended over all the surrounding areas, so this would not be an unusual undertaking. Ordinarily, the giver did not attend the December ceremony. Last year, he had been present because of the occasion of Jonas's selection, in which he was so involved. But his life was usually quite separate from that of the community. No one would comment on his absence or on the fact that he had chosen this day to be away. When the driver and vehicle arrived, the giver would send the driver on some brief errand. During his absence, the giver would help hide Jonas in the storage area of the vehicle. He would have with him a bundle of food, which the giver would save from his own meals during the next 2 days. The ceremony would begin with all the community there, and by then, Jonas and the giver would be on their way. By midday, Jonas's absence would become apparent and would be a cause for serious concern. The ceremony would not be disruptive. Such a disruption would be unthinkable. But searchers would be sent out into the community. By the time his bicycle and clothing were found, the giver would be returning. Jonas, by then, would be on his own, making his journey elsewhere. The giver, on his return, would find the community in a state of confusion and panic, confronted by this situation which they had never faced before, and having no memories from which to find either solace or wisdom, they would not know what to do and would seek his advice. He would go to the auditorium where the people would be gathered still. He would stride to the stage and command their attention. He would make the solemn announcement that Jonas had been lost in the river. He would immediately begin the ceremony of loss. Jonas, Jonas, they would say loudly, as they had once said the name of Caleb. The giver would lead the chant. Together, they would let Jonas's presence in their lives fade away as they said his name in unison, more slowly, softer and softer, until he was disappearing from them, until he was no more than an occasional murmur. And then, by the end of the long day, gone forever, not to be mentioned again. Their attention would turn to the overwhelming task of bearing the memories themselves. The giver would help them. So that's the plan. They laid out, this is what the two of them planned very specifically together. And I want you to think about, based on that plan, is that something that they should follow through? Based on that plan, should Jonas leave the community? What good points were in that you think will be useful? Or that's not a good plan? No, don't do that. What are the reasons why they should not follow through on that plan? All right, we just have a little bit left in the chapter to finish. Keep adding to your chart if you have ideas there. Yes, I understand that they'll need you, Jonas had said at the end of the lengthy discussion and planning. But I'll need you too. Please come with me. He knew the answer, even as he made the final plea. My work will be finished, the giver had replied gently, when I have helped the community to change and become whole. So that's the goal of him leaving, that they're going to change and become whole. But you know what? What does that mean to become whole? We should explain it. I'm grateful to you, Jonas, because without you, I would never have figured out a way to bring about the change. But your role now is to escape, and my role is to stay. But don't you want to be with me, giver? Jonas asked sadly. The giver hugged him. I love you, Jonas, he said, but I have another place to go. When my work here is finished, I want to be with my daughter. Jonas had been staring glumly at the floor. Now he looked up startled. I didn't know you had a daughter, giver. You told me that you'd had a spouse, but I never knew about your daughter. The giver smiled and nodded. For the first time in their long months together, Jonas saw him look truly happy. Her name was Rosemary, the giver said. All right, that is the end of chapter 20. I know you're probably ready to go on to chapter 21, and you can tell there's so little left in the book. Don't do it yet. Please don't do it. And if you do, or have already read the end, do not tell your classmates what happens. Keep it to yourself. We'll get through it. We're almost there. But stick with me as we go through our synthesizing tomorrow. We're going to make a whole bunch of connections, see how all of this goes together. All right. Can't wait to see you for the next lesson. Bye.